My name is Madisen French. This is Brett Robinson, a retired veteran of the Army. I have a couple of questions that I would like to ask you.
Fire away.
Where do you work and how long have you worked there?
Well, I retired from the Army in 2018, January 1st of 2018. It's my first official day of retirement. I spent 24 years total in the United States Army, 20 of it on active duty.
Nice.
And I was stationed in various places around the United States, different locations, and I spent a little time overseas.
That would be cool. What are your job duties there? What were your job duties there?
It was a long road, so beginning, once I became an officer in May of 1998, I went active duty. I started off as a what would be called a tank platoon leader. So I led a platoon of 24 soldiers. We had 4 tanks among us. We were part of a tank company, so and the short terminology that we would have used all the time was my job was to shoot, move, and communicate. With 24 or 22 people, plus a couple of support personnel across the battlefield. I would say, back then, 1998, the wars that we got involved in later hadn't started yet, so we spent most of our time just training. Every day, we were either at the motor pool, making sure that our vehicles were ready to go, or we were in a classroom discussing what we would do if we ever had to go to war. Then after that job, then I became a scout, which was my favorite job that I had in the Army. I only got to do that for about a year. When you're common misperception, I think, with most military personnel is that somebody says that they've been in the military for X many years, and most people assume that it's some combat type of situation, or that you're always in the preparation for combat role, which you may be, but the majority of most people's time is probably spent in an office, probably spent doing some type of support work. The amount of time that you actually spend as an officer in a leadership role where you're leading or training to go fight and win a war is just a few years out of a 20-year career. The rest of your time, you're a planner, or you are some other type of support personnel in an office type environment. The person who's in charge of getting all the supplies, the person who is in charge of getting all the people and getting things arranged. So it's a complex, it's a mentally complex job because the structure is set up as such that you change jobs every 2 years. To say what you do as an Army officer over a 20-year span, there's a lot of things that I did.
I bet there is. What training or education did you receive during your job?
In order to be an officer, most often in the Army, you had to have a bachelor's degree first. So I was already in college when I enlisted in the Army Reserve. I did that partially for college money. So just to get into the Army or Army Reserve as enlisted, you just had to have a high school education or the equivalent, GED or something like that. But to be an officer, you had to have a bachelor's degree. So once I graduated, I basically entered active duty the day after my graduation from college with my bachelor's degree. Then you go to an Army school that lasts about 8 months. And as I said, I was a tank platoon leader first, so I went to an Army school that was about 8 months long. It's shortened down now to about 5 to 6. But back then, it was about an 8-month-long class, and I learned how to be a tank platoon leader. Had to learn a lot about tactics and things like that. Throughout your Army career, you go to schools several times. Every time that you get promoted or you're close to getting promoted, you're probably going to go to a school that's going to be anywhere from 4 to 10 months long. And also, while I was in the Army, to progress in my career, I wanted to ensure that when it came time to evaluate me for promotion, that I was at the appropriate level with my peers or above my peers so that I would be selected for promotion. So I went and I got my master's degree pretty soon after I was commanded. It was 2002, sooner than most of my peers would have, just to make myself eligible for promotion sooner or quicker.
How did you pay for all your training?
The Army pays for all of it, except for the bachelor's degree. I paid for that and had plenty of student loans to pay that off, because back then the GI Bill wasn't very good. It wasn't anything like it is now. Now it's a pretty fantastic bit of money. And then when I got my master's degree, I paid for about half of it, and the Army actually gave me some tuition assistance. They looked at that as something that, the military, great thing about it right now is just about anybody who enlists can come out with a bachelor's degree. You can go in with a high school diploma and 5 or 6 years later, you could either have a master's or a bachelor's degree or be close to one, because the military not only gives you the GI Bill, but while you're in the military, you'd qualify for tuition assistance. And that pays for about 75% of tuition to several different types of schools.
That's very cool.
Yeah.
What was the best part of your job?
Oh, wow. I loved it. So, the military's not for everybody. But I liked problem solving. And in a lot of the jobs that I had, they were very complex. You had to be thoughtful. It required a lot of critical thought on a daily basis, high-paced, relatively stressful environment most of the time. And there wasn't a lot of boredom. And because being an Army officer, because you change jobs a lot, then, I never found anything to be mundane. I never got to the point where I was like, I just didn't like going to work every day.
That's kind of what I hope for when I get older, to have a job that I like. What was the hardest part of your job?
It changed over time, but the first thing that was really difficult was being away from my wife and kids. Very soon after I went active duty, my son was born. He was born a week after I started active duty. And my very first time where I was away from him for any period of time was the following summer, and I spent about 2 months away, and that was agonizing. But then, of course, I deployed to Iraq. By the time I got to that point, we'd gotten used to it, my wife and I. So spending a year away was not as difficult as that first time with 2 months. So that's something that takes a lot of getting used to. But once you get into the groove of it, it's not that bad.
What was your typical day like during your job?
Again, that changed over time, but my typical day always involves some type of physical fitness training. Usually did that in the morning, and then there would be some type of break to go take a shower. The Army term would be conduct personal hygiene, and then eat breakfast, go to work for 4 hours. Normally everybody gets a pretty long lunch period because your day is going to be 10 to 11 hours long because you're going to go and do physical training. That's part of your day. It might start at 6 o'clock in the morning. You're going to train for at least an hour, maybe an hour and a half. Then you take a little bit of time for breakfast, personal hygiene, go back and do some more training. It's either classroom training or go to the motor pool and do maintenance. Then you get lunch, and then you go back and do some more training. It's a long day, but it's worth it.
What tools or equipment did you guys use?
Of course, earlier in my career being a combat soldier, of course, tank vehicles, and every tank, came with a whole load of equipment with it because you had to have tools that you could operate on your tank. If the tank breaks down in the middle of the desert, you're out there stuck. You got to be able to, perform enough maintenance to get yourself moving again. So there's various tools, an entire mechanic set almost, that you're carrying around. And then, of course, everybody had their individual weapon, a handgun, 9mm Beretta is what we had. And then different crew members had other machine guns also that they carried just in case we had to dismount our vehicle. We needed to protect ourselves. Then later on in my career, when I was mostly working in an office, my main piece of equipment was a computer. I had a computer most of the time.
When you were a student, what were your favorite classes?
When I was in high school, it was definitely history, any type of social studies, something where we had interaction with people. I also took some drama classes. I liked that also, and English.
Those are a couple of my favorite classes too. History is my favorite too.
Can't go wrong.
Mm-hmm. As a kid, what did you want to be when you grew up?
My very earliest memory of wanting to be something, I wanted to be an astronaut. I wanted to be a test pilot and fly jets, and then eventually become an astronaut. Fell a little short of that one.
What advice do you have for students like me who want the same job as you?
Gotta get over yourself. When you enter the military, you enter the ultimate team environment. Regardless of whether or not you're the leader or you're the lowest person in whatever unit you are in. The saying that you're only as strong as your weakest link is as true as anything I know. And you can't be a person who is trying to always be better than everyone else. You have to bring up everyone around you, because at the end of the day, when you're in the military, you're in a job that's about living and dying. And your life depends on the success of the weakest person in your unit. So you got to get over yourself and lift that person up and try to get them as close to your level as you possibly can. If not, make them better than you. Because if you can make somebody even better than you, then you have somebody to follow that is worthy of your followership. I
like that. How did your family feel when you went into the Army?
Not good. I was an only child, so my parents weren't incredibly happy with it. And when I initially went in, I just went into the reserves. I was only trying to get a little bit of money for college. I needed discipline. I knew that. I wasn't a very good student. And so I wanted some discipline, and I wanted to get a little bit of money for college, but then I liked it. I really liked it a lot. And so when I went active duty, when I graduated college, my mom was not happy. But she eventually understood me.
Well, that was our last question. Thank you for letting me interview. I had a very good time. I learned a lot.
All right, you're welcome.